Look at all of these cobwebs. Has it really been that long since I've been out here in the shop? It pretty much has. Not because I haven't wanted to be out here. I like to be outside in the summertime, so I guess that's a little bit true. Don't really want to be out here, but I've just had enough videos built up where I've been able to be outside and do some outside projects and very, very much enjoyed that. But we are about to build a couple of tables out of these massive hickory slabs, and I got to move them around so I can actually see what I got. Now looking at these two slabs, they're beautiful slabs first of all, and I have decided that this one here is going to go in the middle. So I'm going to flatten this, we'll have to square up the edges, and then this one will remain in the middle. We'll have to stabilize it a little bit as well. This one has a pretty significant crack down the middle. We could stabilize it, but what I'm going to do is cut it down the middle. We'll flatten this one out, joint it up, and then we will take the wider ends. As you can see, this whole side is wider down here than that side. We'll take these wider ends, flip them around, put them against the skinnier end of this board, and then we'll glue it all up, and that'll kind of give us a 3 foot or so diameter table all the way down the length of this 9 foot table. We will have to, as I mentioned, cut the sides of this square. We'll have to cut the side that we split in the middle here square, and then we will glue that all up, and we're basically going to be gluing the live edge of that far slab back on here on the table that we're going to remove that live edge. So lots of fun coming up. Going to be a lot of work. These slabs are heavy, but hope that made any sense at all, but it's going to look cool. And we'll see what we can cut. You can see in this close-up that the goal was to get as deep as we could with the Craig track saw and then come back with the jigsaw to finish up that cut. So I got this first slab split right here, and I've taken a couple of measurements, which you may or might not be able to see here. So I measured out this board, and then I took measurements from both ends of these two boards. So we'll take about 3/4 of an inch off of this side. We'll take 3/4 of an inch off of this side moving in this way. And that way, over that 9 foot, we're only gonna have about a 1/2 of an inch discrepancy across the whole table, which you'll never even notice. I've decided I am going to cut that slab on the table saw using a kind of jointer board method. I'll show you that when I get to there, but that means we need to flatten that board before I can go through the table saw safely. So we're going to put that to the side. I'm going to go back to these boards and flatten them on the jointer and planer. Some of you that have been with me for a while know this shop is 16 foot wide. That means I cannot get a 10 foot board on that machine and actually joint it properly. So I need to kind of rearrange everything over here, get the jointer kind of to where I'm standing right now so that we can get these boards through these machines. We got something going on here. Jointers over there. I got 10 foot on that side. I was able to duck the dust collection into what is for the table saw line, and then I was just able to get the, actually I can get a little more stock here, just able to get the 220 power for the jointer over here to the table saw and get that plugged in, so we should be good to go. Friday, the wife graciously just came out here and helped us get the single face jointed on the two boards, and now we're going to use a planer board, which I've showed you guys this technique in videos in the past. This has a little hook on the side right there that's going to go on our planer. We're going to run that surface that we just flattened over that board so we can get a flat side, flip it over, blah, blah, blah. We're going to use the full 15 inches of that planer. It is going to get a workout. That took about 10 minutes to do that one board right there. Looking pretty good, not to its final thickness just yet. Down in the very back corner there, it kind of angles away, and I think that's from when I was doing it on the planer board. Maybe it got a little bit wobbly, or maybe I put it in a little bit crooked. But I think that I'm going to stop right about there. Right now the boards are about 1 7/8 inches thick still. I'm going to set these to the side because I need to router plane this big board, get that down to its final dimensions, and then we can use a set of calipers to measure that big board, and I can use the dial indicator on this planer to get this exactly where we need it to be. This large slab is obviously bigger than the planer and jointer that I have, so I need to resort to kind of an unruly method of using a router sled. Now, this is really not fun. It makes an absolute disaster, and it takes a very, very long time to complete this process, but it is the tools that I have at my disposal, so we're making it work. Now, this is also bigger than any work surface that I have in my shop, so to make sure I have a planar surface, I'm using some big pieces of 2x4 inch metal, which is actually going to be turned into the legs of this table in the long run, but I actually didn't make a video about that because I've made legs before, and we can link to that down in the description below. Anyway, once I got the 2x4 rectangular tubing perfectly flat, laid the slab on top of there, and I'm making sure it doesn't rock at all by using these composite shims that you can see me adjusting right here. The router sled is a simple jig made out of some MDF that I had laying around the shop, and as you can see here, the reference surface is those perfectly flat rectangular tubings that we will run the router sled on in our router inside that. Now this is a carbide insert router bit that I'm using for flattening material just like this, and as you can see, it slides through that groove in the router sled, and you slide back and forth and make an absolute disaster of your shop. As you can see, this takes quite a while. You need to go slow. Make sure you don't take too deep of passes at a single time, and make sure you don't take a full width of the blade as well. And did I mention before that this makes a colossal mess, and just when you got one pass done, you're probably not even a quarter of the way there. You gotta go multiple passes so that you don't have to take too deep a cut, and we did need to do both sides of this slab as well. Lots of work, but as you can see here, we are perfectly flat against our reference surface, so finally this slab is in good shape, and now we need to square up the edges after we clean up this colossal mess. I think it was something around 100 gallons of chips that I took off of this slab. Square up those edges, I don't want to be using the Craig track saw again because that wasn't able to cut all the way through the slab, so it left a bit of an uneven joint. So what I'm going to do is make a perfectly flat straight edge, screw that to the bottom of this slab, and then I can run it up against the fence of my Monster Harvey table saw, which can take the full depth of this slab, no problem at all. This saw didn't even care. Just give it a listen. Well, that is heavy. Table saw didn't even bat an eye at that. And bumping up against the planer there. 9 foot is about all I can realistically handle in here. Perfect cut though. So powerful. It's great. I'm going to be using the table saw, doing that exact same process again for the two side wings. Could you run this over the jointer? Yes, you could, but at 9 foot long, it's significantly longer than the beds of the jointer, so it's much easier and more consistent to do it on the table saw. And here you can really see the big picture, and hopefully all of those tapers and angles and measurements I was talking about before make sense, because look at that, we got a uniform size table. Marking out here right quick using my 6-inch Starrett square so that we can get some biscuits in there to help out with alignment of the table. Big slab table like this in the past, I have used my DIY domino, but it's not exactly consistent. It's quite a bit easier to do the biscuit jointer, but at the same time, I am really not a big fan of the biscuit jointer. And honestly, I probably should have just used my DIY domino machine or just gone solo and made sure I had alignment perfectly done with the clamps, which you kind of have to do anyway because there's quite a bit of slop in the biscuit slots. This is obviously an extremely heavy slab, so once you get it in place, you don't really want to move it. As you can see, I have it elevated on those 2x4 rectangular tubings again so that I can get the strap clamps and the bar clamps underneath this to make sure that this slab stays perfectly flat. Now, I have 2 clamps that can span the width of this table, but you don't often use clamps that big and they are very expensive, so some ratchet straps from the back of the truck make pretty quick work and work out pretty well as long as you have some opposing pressure to make sure you don't cup the table, which obviously you don't want to do. A slab of this size is extremely expensive. Slab is out of the clamps. It is looking pretty good. Right now, I got this cleaned up. I got some of the knots cleaned up. We need to move down to the rest of the table over there. Make sure we're not going to get any floaties in our epoxy. And then we need to put a couple of bow ties right here, which I think I'm going to do those out of cherry so that in the end, when they darken up, they kind of look like the darker portions of the hickory. On second thought here, we're going to put that in another video because I have a ton of footage of building this table and it should not go to waste. So make sure you guys subscribed so you come back and you can see all the good work we're going to do later. We're going to do the bow ties, we got to do lots of sanding, and we got to put the finish on, and this is the final result. Pretty worth it.